happens. Yeah, that seems to be working. So that's great. It's really a pleasure to be here and kind of be part of your Zendo for this morning. Rose and I really enjoyed sitting with you and hearing North Carolina birds, which is a treat for people up in Rochester, New York. We don't get those kind of birds. We hear more crows, which is great too, but and robins. So that was a real pleasure. And it's kind of really great to see what Teisho is doing these days. So it's really wonderful to be able to practice together. This was also this week, if you noticed our altar when we were sitting, there's a picture from 1975 of Roshi Kapleau. This May 6th is the 17th anniversary of his passing, and Rose and Roshi Kapleau and I were very close. And so that's always a significant event for us, and we do a service for him, which we just did in our Zendo here on Saturday. And we'll keep that up, his picture up on the altar for through this week. So what I'd like to do this morning is share with you some thoughts about a koan, which is Wuchu and Manjusri's 3x3 front, 3x3 back. It's from the Hekigan-roku, which would be a Blue Cliff record, or Pian Lu in Chinese. It's weird. I think it's number 36 or 37. I just don't remember off the top of my head. I should have written that down, but here we go. So let me also make sure, hold on one second. You know what? Somehow the koan isn't in what I wrote down. Oh, here it is, yeah. So let me first start with the koan itself so you can hear what it sounds like. It's Hekigan-roku 35, actually. So Manjusri asked Wucho, we know who Manjusri is, of course, Bodhisattva of wisdom, asked Wucho, and we'll get into the background of how this all came about. In Japanese, Wucho would be Mujiko. And he asked him, where have you just come from? And Wucho replied, the South. Manjusri said, how is Southern Buddhism faring? Wucho answered, the monks in the latter days of the law have little regard for the precepts. Manjusri said, are there many or few? Wucho said, here about 300, there around 500. Wucho then asked Manjusri, how does Buddhism fare in this part of the world? Manjusri said, the worldly and the holy dwell together. Dragons and snakes intermingle. Wucho asked, are there few or many? Manjusri said, front 3x3, back 3x3. So a little introduction on where this is going. It often feels like we live in two worlds, one of problems, difficulties, challenges, confusions, unreality, and the other a world of peace, harmony, selflessness, truth, and joy. One world is painful, dull, time-consuming, and ordinary, way too ordinary. And the other perfect, beautiful, meaningful, satisfying. When we're in the midst of difficulties or stuck in routines, we may dream of escaping from the one to the other. We may say this is the essence of the so-called human condition. We are divided, left hoping that one day, even if need be after death, we will enter that better world of which we dream. Some say this is a remnant of childhood moments when the world was us and we the world, and we experienced oceanic feelings of oneness. Wordsworth, near the opening of his Intimations of Immortality from Recollections of Early Childhood, wrote, there was a time when meadow, grove, and stream, the earth and every common sight to me did seem apparelled in celestial light, the glory and the freshness of a dream. It is not now, as it has been of yore, turn whereso I may, by night or day, the things which I have seen, I can see no more. But must such a painfully divided situation be the only truth? Is there a way to live whole and complete as we are, so that the place where we stand is the pure lotus land, and this very body, the body of Buddha, as Master Hakuin says in the Zazen Wasam song in praise of Zazen. Now, before we go running off toward a happy lotus land, let's slow down and get real. Is Hakuin right? I mean, look at our world. Greed, anger, ignorance, they seem to be everywhere. Acts of injustice, racism, misogyny, and inhumanity fill the news. Oil sludge gathers in our oceans, plumes of smoke darken the Amazon. Many adults and many children are hungry and abused. How much of our global politics is built on lies, driven by lust for wealth and power? How can this place where we stand be a pure lotus land? Isn't that just a wishful religious fantasy? And if we accept it, that this is a lotus land, a pure land, would we then just shrug off racism, misogyny, injustice, greed, hatred, selfishness as simply, oh, well, good enough, and become Pollyannas, sitting with Dr. Pangloss to repeat with smug satisfaction, it's the best of all possible worlds? Fortunately, there is this old koan that may help us, for in it we get to interview not simply a human teacher, but Manjusri, Bodhisattva of non-dual wisdom himself. And that is the koan of Manjusri's 3x3 front, 3x3 back, where he interviews the monk Wu Cho, and then Wu Cho interviews Manjusri. So we just went through that. I won't repeat it. Well, let's go over a little bit. Manjusri, of course, is the Bodhisattva of perfect, highest, non-dual prajna wisdom, the ever-youthful, gentle-voiced one. Tradition says that after becoming a Buddha, Manjusri decided to stick around and head back down the mountain of realization and become a Bodhisattva again, so he could teach upcoming Buddhas. In fact, he became the teacher of the past 7 Buddhas, including Shakyamuni, the Buddha of our world cycle. For him, this was his way of really activating compassion. It was his art form. It was his play. Manjusri is often shown swinging a sword, indicating a keen-eyed ability to cut through all habitual delusions, all self-centeredness, all dualistic sense of me in here and you out there. Sometimes he sits quietly with the scroll of Prajna Paramita, the heart of perfect wisdom. Form is only emptiness, emptiness only form, in his hand or close nearby. Sometimes he rides a lion, the noblest of beasts, demonstrating the integrity, courageous, and selfless nobility at the core of our own actual nature. And these days, I tend to use the term actual nature more than true nature. True nature makes it sound as if it's something separate, different from false nature. So these days, I'm trying to use actual nature. It's our actual nature. Manjusri can wear long hair like a layperson, or royalty, or his hair may be set in 5 bunches, indicating the 5 wisdoms that arise as the mind settles and opens into vast, empty intimacy. Sometimes, especially in Japan, he may take the form of a shaved head monk seated on a lion. And in that guise, he sits on an altar which is in the center of the Zendo, out among the sitters, showing his commitment to absolute equality. So if you've ever been in a Zendo in Japan, there you may see that there's no Buddha in the Zendo. There's only Manjusri, and he doesn't sit up on an altar up against the wall, but on an altar that's like almost a pillar right in the center of the room, out among the sitters. That's his practice, absolute equality. So now, Yamada Roshi who appears in the Three Pillars of Zen as a very important figure for Kapleau Roshi. He was Yasutani Roshi's heir and Aitken Roshi's transmission teacher. Yamada was a layman, a cigar-smoking Japanese businessman whose deep initial enlightenment is recorded in the Three Pillars. He was a hospital administrator with a family, and his wife, in fact, was the chief doctor at the hospital. And at one point, he gave Teishos on all 100 cases of the Blue Cliff record. So I want to read a little from an excerpt which summarizes the full story that appears in the Blue Cliff, because the case is very truncated, as it were. And Wan Wu, who puts the final version of the Blue Cliff record together, has a much more extended context. And I'd like to share that context of how this case comes about. So Yamada, I'm just using Yamada because he has a good summation. Wuchu has come to Mount Wutai. Mount Wutai, by the way, is the place sacred to Manjusri. So he comes to Mount Wutai, which is a 5-peaked mountain, to meet Manjusri. On his way up the mountain, he's come to a barren area without trees or grass. However, there's a temple there, but it's not a real one. It's a kind of phantom temple that Manjusri has caused to appear by supernatural power. Upon entering the temple, Wuchu finds an old man who is Manjusri himself. Now, in that case that I shared with you, we don't know, I think we do know, Wuchu doesn't know he's talking to Manjusri. He thinks he's talking to an old man up in a temple on the top of the mountain that's sacred to Manjusri. But Manjusri has appeared in the form of this old man in the conversation. And the koan is simply their dialogue at the time of the encounter. So then Manjusri asks Wucho where you've come from. And Wucho says, from the south. And Wan Wu, Yamada Roshi says, has some cynical comments to make about this exchange. Wan Wu asks, that would engo in Japanese, in all this vast expanse of the world, he asks, where is the south? Perhaps you can see why I chose this koan to share with you today. Where is the south? Here I am up in Rochester, and yet I seem to be in the south, hearing those birds. It's very strange. So Manjusri says, how is the Buddhist Dharma in the south maintained? Wucho said, the monks of this age of the perishing Dharma are venerating the precepts a little. Now, Yamana explains a little, and I want to go further into this. The age of the perishing Dharma is known as the Mapo, and it means the period where the Buddhist Dharma degenerates after the age of the right Dharma and of the semblance Dharma. So Wucho answers, yes, these days the Dharma is going down the drain, but some monks are still upholding the practice and the precepts. Wucho's answer, says Yamada, is nothing but a serious, almost tactlessly serious response. So let's look a little more into this. The issue of the perishing Dharma refers to the traditional Buddhist belief that at the Buddha's time, it was easy to realize enlightenment. A few words from the master and bingo. Later, practice realization took more work as the veil between mind and things was thicker, denser. Later yet, great effort only brought meager results. Finally, nowadays, and nowadays in terms of the Mapo means starting about 1,000 years ago, enlightenment became more rare still, with only a special few able to catch a glimpse. In short, we now live in the Mapo, or Dharma ending age. Now, the good news is that given the mess of our times, the difficulties we clearly see all around us, it is very clear that we need something more than mere belief. Belief alone can no longer satisfy. We know that we must find a way to experience the real for ourselves. We know that we must do this, and these days, to do it, most of us will have to leave our birth culture, as well as the religions we grew up in, if we mean to find a path that can lead us beyond mere belief. It can be a lonely road and confusing. So Sangha is important. Having peers and companions is of deep value. Years ago, I was in a small workshop with the poet and translator Robert Bly, one of the founders of what became the men's movement. And he said, having companions increases our courage. Having companions increases our courage. That's Sangha in a nutshell. Having a guide, a teacher, makes actually walking the path possible. In Buddhism, a teacher is known as a Kalyana Mitra. It simply means spiritual friend. The term means someone who has gone far enough down the road that they can offer solid advice on how to best handle the pitfalls that lie ahead. Now, what about numbers? Wuchu said 300 here, 500 there. Does it matter how many are doing it? How many are committed? Are the numbers important? And what do the numbers presented by Manjusri mean? 3 by 3 front, 3 by 3 back. Wucho answers one way and Manjusri another. Wucho encounters Manjusri up on a wild mountainside, the Bodhisattva of wisdom, the great Kalyana Mitra, spiritual friend, makes a temple appear and in the guise of an old man asks Wucho how practice is going back down the mountain, down there in the south, where he's from. Wucho answers that these days, as we live in the Mapo, there are problems. Some are trying, but it's not anywhere near perfect. Asked about numbers, he says it's here and there, hit or miss, maybe 300 here and 500 there. Not altogether bad, but not so great. He's being truthful and honest and correct. Our experience tallies with his, but it's flat, isn't it? It's the same old story we already know too well. Where's the Zen? Where's the life of it? His only saving grace is that he doesn't know he's actually talking with Manjusri himself. If he knew, he'd probably be kicking himself. Then the tables are turned, and now Wucho boldly takes the lead. And Wan Wu, who created the finished Blue Cliff record, approves of this. He steps up, Wuchu does, and asks Manjusri how things are going in his neck of the woods. Of course, he only thinks he's speaking to an old man. And now we get an entirely different response, one that teeters on the edge of incomprehensibility. We move from the old story to the ancient one. Manjusri says that nothing is separated or clarified. Worldly and holy are entangled. Little snakes and fire-breathing dragons all jumbled together. As to how many? Well, I'll tell you. It's 3 by 3 front, 3 by 3 back. Here are two radically different visions of reality. In the one, things are not going particularly well, but regardless, there are still folks doing their best in a limited way, a bunch here and a bunch there, a Sangha here, a Sangha there, a dedicated person here, a dedicated person there, all of them working at it while awash in endless cultural and personal surging tides of greed, anger, ignorance, chaos, selfishness, worry, anxiety, and anguish. In the other view, there's no way to count, which does not mean numberless. No way to even know how it's going. So what degenerate age are you even talking about in this ordinary life in which we stub our toes, laugh with joy, cry with pain, feel cold and heat, see up and down, and then age and die? Is this holy or worldly? If saints and sinners, great dragon-like practitioners, and ordinary garden snake variety sitters are all intermingled, how can you tell which is which? And how can you know where to turn and who offers truth? And are there are even many or few. To repeat, Mapo is the world age when you do it, you work hard, but your society and times are not supportive. In fact, they may present significant obstacles to our own maturing in wisdom and compassion. In short, to our growing up, which is really simply what bodhisattva means. A bodhisattva is a wisdom being. That's the literal translation, which means someone who's wise enough to put in the effort to grow beyond all childish self-centeredness. A wisdom being is a grown-up being. A wisdom being, a bodhisattva, is a grown-up or growing up being. Indigenous communities that still manage to survive somewhat spiritually intact these days are struggling, even now, to resist assimilation into our broken world of deranged values, in which living forests are chopped up into dollar bills and the deep blue sea is turned into a trash receptacle. This is Mapo. Maybe. Yamada Roshi adds, Wan Wu seems to find Wu Cho's response almost irritating, since there's nothing Zen-like in these plain and serious answers. And indeed, Wan Wu himself seems frustrated by the simplicity of Wu Cho's answers, because he writes, let me answer instead. That's what Wan Wu writes. He's saying, come on, that's hardly good enough. Yet Wu Cho is not a lost cause. Now he steps forward, turns the tables, and asks Manjusri, how is the Buddhist Dharma being maintained here? On the response, worldly and saints live together. Dragons and snakes are mixed with each other. Yamada Roshi writes, distinguished persons and ordinary folk, saints and evildoers, elderly and children, sick and healthy, we're all together in this universe, like passengers on a great ship rolling in the waves as it makes its way. Monks and novices, company presidents and janitors, the great ones and not so great ones, all are one. Dragons and snakes are mixed with each other. Think of a public bath in traditional Japan, stripped of everything and all in it together. How's that? For worldly and saints live together. Dragons and snakes are mixed with each other. When I flew to Japan for the first time in 1989, it was a very long flight. Then I had maybe a 4-hour bus ride through Tokyo to meet my host. And then another 2-hour drive to the little town outside Tokyo where I was going to be staying. I'd been traveling for days by then, and it was now like 2 a.m. my time, early evening in Japan. And immediately, once I put my bags down, we headed off to the local Zendo, the Japanese bath, public bath, to soak in the hot water. And there were businessmen, students, old and young, men on one side of a low wall, women on the other, all equally relaxing, soaking away our ills, snakes and dragons mixed together. But what is the fundamental point? And how will you personally express it? Wu Cho then asked, how many are there? And Manjusri answered, 3 by 3 front, 3 by 3 back. In his commentary in the Blue Cliff record, Wan Wu reveals that the old man, who is really Manjusri, then offered Wu Cho tea in a crystal cup and asked, do you have this in the South? When Wu Cho, serious as ever, answered no, Manjusri then asked, then what do you use to drink tea in the South? Wu Cho was again speechless and caught flat-footed. Here's something you might find interesting. It's a cross-reference to this little dialogue from the Denkoroku, the last formal koan book we work on before Tozan's 5 modes or ranks and the Juju Kinkai or precept koans. It's from the transmission story from Qingguan to Shirdo. So here it goes. See if it seems familiar. The 35th ancestor, Shirdo, called on Qingguan, who asked him, "Where have you come from?" The master said, "I've come from Cao Chi." The ancestor held up his, I don't have it with my, his teaching stick, or in this case, the hasu, which is the stick with the white hairs, fly whisk, like symbol of his authority, and asked, "At Cao Shi, is there this?" The master answered, "Not only no such thing at Cao Chi, but also there is none in India." The ancestor asked him, "You haven't been to India, have you?" The master said, "If I went there, that would be there." Now, Shirdo clearly handles himself in a very different way than Wu Cho, who, whenever he's asked, goes, "No." The point here is simply that themes reappear throughout our koan curriculum. And they're like story threads, narrative lines that persistently reappear in all oral traditions, forming endless variations on a central theme. So we'll meet these kind of dialogues many times in our koan curriculum, all taking various forms of making very similar points, but looked at from any number of different perspectives. So anyway, Wan Wu continues in the Blue Cliff record, telling us that Manjusri, this is all the context around the koan itself, then asked a boy attendant to see his guest, Wucho, off to the temple gate. If you've ever been to one of the temples, Zen temples in Japan, you should know or will know, the temple gate is like a huge 3-story building of a structure with 3 entrances, one reserved for the emperor. And there are galleries of sculptures, life-size, sometimes arhats and bodhisattvas, beautiful murals, all inside these steep staircases that go up to these multi-levels of the gate. And the gate itself can be as far as half a mile, a quarter of a mile from the Zendo, the Dharma hall itself, the monastery or temple grounds. So on the way to the temple gate, Wucho says to the boy attendant, "The old man told me 3 by 3 front, 3 by 3 back. But how many is that?" The boy says, "Oh, Reverend." Wucho answers, "Yes." The boy asks, "How many is that?" That boy attendant, who may be another form of the Bodhisattva Manjusri, is sharp, isn't he? But again, Wucho remains nonplussed. Then he asks the boy, "What temple is this?" Now, Yamada Roshi says the attendant says that it's called Prajna Temple, which is rather perfect for Manjusri. The Cleary and Cleary translation of the Blue Cliff record, which is the standard one we, as book form anyway, that we can find, that's so far in English, does not name the temple. Instead, they have the boy point to one of the 2 guardian figures standing at the temple entrance. And he says, "Look back there." When Wucho turns and looks, the temple, the boy, the guardians, the gate, they're all gone. There's nothing there, only a wide, empty valley. We're told later that the valley was called Vajra, or adamantine, or diamond cave or valley. The diamond cuts everything, but is not cut itself. And the Vajra is like a thunderbolt. Also good for Manjusri. Now, as to the guardian figures, on our pilgrimage to China in 2006, we discovered that Zen temples in China usually have 2 fierce and quite huge guardian figures standing at the entrance. If you know your Joseph Campbell, you'll see right away they're archetypal figures of duality, meant to terrify the unworthy and keep out those not yet ready to tread on sacred ground. Like Gandalf on the bridge in the Mines of Moria, they announce, "You shall not pass." But once inside, when you turn around, you find yourself not facing those fierce guardians, but Hotai, the round, happily smiling monk of the 10th and final Oxfording pictures, who gives gifts and offers helping hands, an emanation into our time of the far distant future Buddha, Maitreya, he, Hotai, is a figure of comfort and encouragement, literally the reverse of those fearsome guardians. Or he is the ferocious guardians of duality when seen from within, when we've gone safely past them and are standing on our own home ground. Now, to return to the commentary in the Blue Cliff record, Wan Wu says that Wu Cho, get this, stayed on as a cook at a real monastery on Mount Wutai after that. Cook, of course, is a position of eminence and responsibility in Zen monasteries and temples. Now, here's the interesting little twist. At times, Manjusri would appear to Wu Cho, the temple cook, in the clouds of steam rising over the pots of cooking rice. He'd see the figure of Manjusri in the steam rising from the pots of cooking rice. And whenever Manjusri appeared, Wu Cho would hit at the image with a wooden ladle to drive it away. Clearly, he had matured and was now standing on his own two legs. Still, says Wan Wu, this is drawing the bow after the thief has left. Indeed, let me ask, why did Manjusri even appear over the rice in the first place? Wan Wu also adds, this time, as soon as he said, how is Buddhist teaching being carried on in the South, he should have hit him. Then he would have gotten somewhere. Goes right back to the original case. As soon as the dialogue began, Wu Cho should have hit him. Then he would have gotten somewhere. When everything is gone, entirely gone, we have a great opportunity not to bemoan our losses, but to see at last what truly is. When the leaves fall, the landscape stands revealed. When the boy, the temple, all of it vanished, it could have been Wu Cho's moment. No Manjusri, no temple, no one speaking, no one being spoken to, no eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, mind. But he wasn't ready and seems to have let the moment pass. Later, however, Wu Cho was able to wield a wooden spoon as if it was Manjusri's sword, and using it skillfully cut away Manjusri himself. Let's not overlook that. If we keep on practicing, even if we start off dull as Wu Cho, we too can and will mature. Yet Wu Cho did speak with Manjusri and with a boy attendant. Those are facts. He stood in an old temple too, and yet we're told there was nothing. Well, it's not part of the koan case. Wan Wu felt it worth retaining in his commentary. What's he getting at? Regardless, 3x3 front, 3x3 back remains the koan's real challenge. There is no sliding past it, no evading it. Aitken Roshi calls it one of the most difficult koans in our curriculum, which may or may not be true. It may have just been his personal experience of it. Hakuin said that 8 koans in our curriculum were most difficult, and he called them nanto koans, those that were most difficult to pass or penetrate. But later, various teachers commenting on this said, they were simply the ones Hakuin found hardest to resolve. Sometimes for one person, a simple koan can be hard. A more complex one, easy. It's different for each of us. The good news is that in realizing 3x3 front, 3x3 back, we find ourselves at home in a world that is not 2, not even 1. The fact that Manjusri's perfectly selfless, non-dual wisdom manifests endlessly, that it is here now, complete as ever, means that the Mapo, Dharma ending age, is just a story, a fiction. and a kind of cop-out at that. Actual nature is always right here, right where we are. And because it is already here, fully us, each one of us, of course it can be realized, but realizing it is not the same as mentally grasping it. Mumen, in his Gateless Barrier, the Wumenkwan, or Japanese Mumenka, comments on another case, I accept the old barbarian's realization. I do not accept his understanding. Practice realization will take work, but so does anything of real value. 3x3 front, 3x3 back also tells us that we can't simply hide out in emptiness, signing off on the complexities of life, nor can we remain silent when things are wrong. The problems of our self-centered age with its racism, sexism, addictions, environmental destruction, and polarized politics are daily with us. On the one hand, we can't allow ourselves the luxury of becoming cynical. And on the other, we can't afford the luxury of abandoning our own personally sincere efforts to awake, to actualize bodhisattva vows and become of benefit to all. There are religions that say if we lead good lives here in this mess, we'll find ourselves in the perfect place at death. Is this true? Are we willing to bank a life on it to find out if it is true? Can we wait till physical death to know the truth? Is it even wise? And is that any way to live? How shall we live where we are? In this very place, where social and environmental issues threaten to overwhelm us every day, and still find joy, satisfaction, meaning, and truth, not in special things, but in our ordinary daily lives. How is this difficult place where we stand the pure lotus land? 3x3 front, 3x3 back removes all stain of living in two worlds. How is the place where we stand, and not only stand, but sit, lie down, eat, talk, work, worry, pay bills, and fix problems? 3x3 front, 3x3 back. Unlike some religions, Buddhism doesn't require that you believe Manjusri or even the Buddha, because compared to us, they appear saint-like, angelic, or godlike. Zen Buddhism says we must find out for ourselves whether they're telling the truth or not. How? Through this very practice. We count this breath, experience this breath, face the unknowing of this koan straight on, and let everything else go. When we focus fully on this breath, on this count, on this koan, there is only that. There's no room left for habitual involvements with our own ancient self-centeredness. We do not have to push the self away or try to suppress it. All such doing simply reifies something that is not from the start. Instead, we simply focus on the practice. In the midst of self-centered thoughts, even as greed, anger, and ignorance arise over and over, we focus again and again on the practice, breath by breath, count by count, repeating the koan over and over. Gradually, it gets clear. And suddenly we see. And once we see, gradually again, but with greater and greater conviction and joy, we put our shoulder to the old Dharma wheel to help keep it turning. Continuing steadily, devotedly, honestly, doing our best in the midst of busy lives and complex times. 3x3 front, 3x3 back may start off sounding like nonsense, like some old children's nursery rhyme, like something from a fairy tale. 3x3 front, 3x3 back. But in time, we may find that these seemingly nonsensical words hold all the ancient and profound wisdom of Manjusri Bodhisattva, him or herself. All the wonder of our own real place in the universe is right here, right in these words. How can that be? Have we simply gone soft in the head from too much zazen? Hakuin said, if you want to know this, refer to the number of last night's stars and the number of this morning's raindrops. Or as Manjusri once asked Wucho, where do you come from? And how is your Southern Buddhism faring these days? So we'll stop here. I don't know if we have any time or if you have any closing ritual that you use, Teisho, but I'll stop the recording at this point and we can chat or recite great vows, whatever is your usual way of doing things.